Hello, welcome to Altaghier English broadcast. Saraya's Salam forces, which are led by Muqtada Sadr, accused one of the factions inside the popular mobilization of assassinating one of its leaders in Baghdad. According to witnesses, an explosive charge exploded on a queue of 3 cars that belongs to the leaders of Saraya's Salam at the eastern side of Baghdad, which resulted in the killing of a leader and 2 others got wounded. They added that a state of alert prevailed at Sadr city and the surroundings areas on the background of the spread of hundreds of elements of Saraya's Salam militia, with the total absence of the security forces and the rest of the popular mobilization factions. Security forces from inside Salahuddin Governorate clarified that big disagreements occurred within the popular mobilization leaders. The disagreements occurred after the withdrawal of some of these factions without informing the other factions. The Gulf newspaper stated that this withdrawal, which came in compliance with the orders of the U.S. forces that recently based itself in military bases in Salahuddin Governorate, made the leaders of the popular mobilization accuses each other of being a traitor. The Iraqi Prime Minister Haidar al-Abadi confirmed every step he decided towards the reforms in Iraq was painful. Especially, he announced them on the media and didn't inform the Iraqi blocs about them because it concerns the Iraqi people only. Al-Abadi revealed in a TV interview that there are several sides working on spreading false rumors to distort the reforms, confirming that he will make difficult procedures to reform the current Iraqi situation, saying that one of the strong reforms was to reduce the special grade salaries into the half. Al-Abadi added that there are people who tries to get closer to the ministers, professionals, and seeks to bring their groups only, indicating that it is not possible to implement reforms with ministers who follow their political blocs only. The Daily Mail newspaper confirmed through a source at the global chemical arms watchdog that ISIL used mustard gas to attack Kurdish forces in Iraq. A source at the Organization for the Probation of Chemical Weapons said that the lab test had come back positive for the sulfur mustard after around 35 Kurdish troops were poisoned on the battlefield southwest of Erbil last August. Last September, Germany's Foreign Intelligence BND was the first to report the possible of used chemical weapons by ISIL. BND chief Gerhard Schnidler said the agency has information that ISIL used mustard gas in northern Iraq. The spies collected blood samples from Kurds who were injured in clashes with ISIL. Iraqi's prime minister said Baghdad would pay the salaries of the government employees in Kurdistan if the northern region stopped selling oil independently, suggesting a deal on sharing oil and revenues could be revived. After a decade-long economic boom, the Kurdistan regional government began to suffer in 2014 when Baghdad slashed its share of the budget in response of the Kurds, in pursuit of economic independence, building their own pipeline to Turkey. The KRG was forced to cut public workers' salaries by to 75% this month as the region grapples with an economic crisis brought to a head by plummeting oil prices. The European Union's top diplomat Federica Mogherini said that the safeguarding of civilians and humanitarian aid sites were a priority as she condemned the airstrikes carried out on a hospital supported by medical charity Médecins Sans Frontières in the Idlib province of northern Syria.
What happened today to the hospital of Médecins Sans Frontières is completely unacceptable, and we will continue to pressure all the parties to respect the basic principles of humanitarian law and focus on the protection of civilians. In the same spirit, the European Union is taking a fundamental role in the task force that has started already to work in Geneva in these days on humanitarian delivery. if we want to play a major role in the delivery of the humanitarian aid on the ground, we have to be present in the ground. We have done so all along the crisis across the border between Turkey and Syria. We found it useful at this stage to try and reach the difficult to reach areas from the ground, also from Damascus. We have worked on this in the past months, quietly, as you have noticed, with the regime. Obviously, you cannot expect that this happens without the regime agreeing in opening an office in Damascus. So yes, there is an agreement on that. And I think that it will become operational in the coming weeks.
Turkey accused Russia of carrying out an obvious war crime after 2 schools, a hospital, and a Médecins Sans Frontières medical center near the Turkish-Syrian border were hit by missiles, killing tens of people. The massacre occurred as Russian-backed Syrian troops intensified their push toward the rebel stronghold of Aleppo, and residents blamed the strikes on Russia. The Turkish Foreign Ministry said Turkey warned that bigger and more serious consequences would be inevitable if Russia does not immediately end such attacks. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad said any ceasefire did not mean each side had to stop using weapons, and nobody was capable of securing the conditions for one within a week. World powers agreed in Munich on Friday to stop the hostilities scheduled to start a week later, but Syrian army offensive across the country backed by Russian airstrikes continued unstoppably. Al-Assad said that there are many questions before a ceasefire could happen, including defining who is a terrorist, adding that as far as the state is concerned, anyone who carried a weapon against it was a terrorist. The Independent newspaper published today that 4 American journalists have been detained in Bahrain while they were reporting on the anniversary of one of the largest uprisings of the Arab Spring. American freelance journalist Anna Thursday and 3 male journalists were taken on the 14th of February. The group reportedly provided false information that they were tourists, and one journalist allegedly wore a mask and took part in an attack on an officer alongside other writers. The U.S. Embassy in Manama confirmed it was aware of the arrest of the 4 U.S. citizens but could not discuss the case due to privacy concerns. Former President George W. Bush came to the aid of his brother Jeb Bush in his Republican presidential campaign in South Carolina with a rousing endorsement of his character and a call for voters to reject the angry bluster of Donald Trump.
The presidency is a serious job that requires sound judgment and good ideas. And there's no doubt in my mind that Jeb Bush has the experience and the character to be a great president. Strength is not empty rhetoric. It is not bluster. It is not theatrics. Real strength, strength of purpose, comes from integrity and character. And in my experience, the strongest person usually isn't the loudest one in the room. I've seen in my brother a quiet conviction and a core of conscience that cannot be shaken. And my hope is that the people of South Carolina will see this as well.
The Guardian newspaper stated that the Republican frontrunner Donald Trump has threatened to sue Ted Cruz over the senator's eligibility for president, saying that unless his rivals stop telling lies, he will take the issue of his birth in Canada to court. With less than a week to go until the next Republican primary contest in South Carolina, Trump also lashed out at party leaders, making a threat to run a third-party campaign. The warning came in response to Trump's complaint that he had been booed during Saturday's night's debate because the audience had been stuffed with wealthy donors who opposed his Mavic run. The Washington Post newspaper published an article regarding Donald Trump's criticism on the former U.S. President George W. Bush, especially regarding the invasion of Iraq in 2003. The newspaper stated that it's possible that Donald Trump has been hurt by telling the truth. Trump himself must be reeling from such a development and has probably by now vowed to return to lying and bluster seasoned with personal insults. But the fact remains that when he called the war on Iraq a big fat mistake, he was exactly right. Jeb Bush, the very good brother of a very bad president, has now turned legitimate criticisms of George W. Bush into an attack on his family.
The war in Iraq has been a disaster. It started the chain of events that leads now to the migration, maybe the destruction of Europe. He started the war in Iraq. Am I supposed to be a big fan? We spent $2 trillion on that war. We lost thousands of lives. We have wounded warriors who I love all over the place. It shouldn't have started. We would have been so much better off if Bush and the rest of them went to the beach and didn't do anything. If you had Saddam Hussein, who's a bad guy and all of that, but he made a living off killing terrorists. Now, if you want to become a terrorist, you go to Iraq. That's like the Harvard of terrorism, okay? So, look, it was not a great job.
U.S. President Barack Obama gathered leaders from Southeast Asia to strengthen trade ties and form a common stance on South China Sea in a summit where the White House hopes that it will solidify U.S. influence in the region.
This reflects my personal commitment and the national commitment of the United States to a strong and enduring partnership with your 10 nations individually and to Southeast Asia as one region, as one community, ASEAN. And here at the summit, we can reaffirm that strong, prosperous, and inclusive societies require good governance, rule of law, accountable institutions, vibrant civil societies, and upholding human rights.
President Barack Obama top national security advisor Susan Rice said that she expects China will support the new international sanctions on North Korea for its recent rocket launch.
But I think it unlikely that China wants to be seen by the international community as the protector of North Korea, given its recent outrageous behavior in violation of international law and UN Security Council resolutions. So given that, I expect that they will indeed come on board with significant new sanctions, and we're working towards that end.
According to Reuters, the world's top two oil exporters, Saudi Arabia and Russia, will hold talks on Tuesday as producers try to tackle a glut that has pushed prices to their lowest in over a decade. Saudi Arabia's oil minister Ali Al-Naimi and his Russian counterpart Alexander Novak will meet in the Qatari capital Doha, where they will be joined by ministers from OPEC members Qatar and Venezuela. The meeting revives memories of a 2001 encounter between OPEC and non-OPEC producers when OPEC heavyweight Saudi Arabia pushed through a global deal to curb output in which Russia agreed to participate for the first and last time. However, Moscow never probably followed through on its pledge to curb exports. Uganda's youth will play a big role in the country's upcoming general election, with many of them voting for the first time.
The youth vote is important, but with the but, if only they turn up to vote. Because the truth of the matter is, it's not even about Uganda alone. Internationally, youths don't normally turn up to vote because the youth usually are said not to know what they want.
An expensive winter storm bore down on the U.S. East Coast, scuttling almost 1,400 flights and threatening a treacherous wet commute on Tuesday after the holiday weekend. That's all for the news. Have a good day.